Hello everyone, I am Brittany Willis and I will be giving you the overview of the country Mexico to give a little background about the country and the Mexican drug war as well. It is important to know the history and the culture of this country to understand the problems that they are facing in more depth. First, I would like to start with a little bit of the demographics. The population is at 116,220,947, a very large number for the population. Compared to the rest of the world, it's the 11th largest in population. The area is at 1,964,375 square kilometers. Mexico is known for their many natural resources. These resources include petroleum, silver, copper, gold, lead, zinc, natural gas, and their timber. Mexico's most important natural resource is their petroleum. The country has an abundant amount of petroleum and natural gas. Next, I would like to move on into the history of Mexico and give a little bit of a synopsis. Mexico is known for their rich culture and strong tradition. This country is made of 31 states and under one federal district. Mexico gained its independence in 1810, and it is also known as the largest country population-wise in Latin America. It is also known for its Mayan and Aztec roots. The country unfortunately has been under a lot of stress, and many violent acts and killings have been taken over in this country. They are still seeking for peace and harmony. Next, I would like to move on to the ethnic groups and languages. Mexico is comprised of the Mestizo descent, which is at 60%, Amerindian at 30%, and then white and other at 9% and 1%. Mestizo, as you can see, is the largest group and has been identified by Britannica Encyclopedia as a mixed blood, combined of European and Indian descent. The languages that are spoken are predominantly Spanish at 92%. They also have Spanish and indigenous languages at 5.7%, and indigenous only and unspecified at 0.8%. Now I would like to talk about the age structure of Mexico. As you can see, 0 to 14 is at 27.4%. The 15 to 24 year age range is at 18.1%. 25 to 54 is at 40.7%. The 55 to 64 and 65 and older are both at 6.9%. I thought this was very interesting to add to the presentation because, as you can tell, the most predominant age group is the 25 to 54 range. Unfortunately, that is the group that is doing most of the killings and violent acts when it comes to Mexican drug cartel. Also looking at the age range for 55 and up, the numbers are extremely low. This could be an indication for life expectancy in Mexico. These poor individuals are fighting for their lives, but to only live it for such a short time due to this war. Next, the type of government that Mexico has is considered a federal republic. It is basically the same type of government that the U.S. has. Federal republic is a government made up of federal states with a constitution and self-governing subunits. The current chief of state is Enrique Pena Nieto, elected in 2012. Their legal system is considered a civil law system with an influence of constitutional law theory. The U.S. has guided Mexico quite a bit when it comes to the drug cartel. The country is doing the best that they can, but it is never a bad idea to have someone support you as well. Together, the U.S. and the Mexico might be able to target this drug cartel. On to the history of the drug war, or the events leading up to it. Many reports say that this war originally started when many Mexican military soldiers made deals with the drug lords for added protection for them. They paid a little bit better, and it gave them opportunity to get more money. After searching for timelines, I found out that in 1971, Nixon declared a war on drugs and decided to do all that they could to try to end this drug cartel before it continued to enter into the U.S. Even after many attempts, in 1985, cocaine smuggling shifted to Miami, and the U.S. had to crack down on maritime. In 2006, the former chief of state Calderon did a huge crackdown on drug trafficking organizations through military troops and federal police. This unfortunately led to over 40,000 deaths from drug violent related acts. In 2007, Mexico extradited Gulf Cartel kingpin Cardenas to the U.S. and seized an historic 23-ton, which is equivalent to about 50,000 pounds of cocaine. Events like these led to arrests of hundreds of gang members to help this drug war, but unfortunately it led to more violence, which is still trying to be controlled today. To wrap this history up, in 2012, Chief Nieto announced a shift in strategy change in hopes that this war will eventually be controlled. Chief Nieto has been partnering up with President Obama, and it will be discussed later on in this presentation about some of the things that they planned on changing. There are several drug trafficking organizations who have taken power over the country of Mexico. This map here displays where most of them reside and the areas that they have taken over. Los Zetas and the Sinaloa Federation are the largest of the drug organizations. Los Zetas have been considered the most powerful and have committed crimes and murders out of this world. Los Zetas have been known to control the two largest drug routes and have been rivals with Sinaloa, for the third largest. These groups are not only in Mexico, but their efforts have expanded into other countries and have begun to leak pretty bad into the U.S. Hopefully with this background of Mexico and the history of the war, it will give you a little bit more insight for the rest of our presentation.
We've looked at the country itself. Now we're going to focus on the conflict. The drug traffic in and through Mexico has been around for many years. So what has caused the escalation is the question. The simplest answer is the warring drug cartels and corruption. A cartel is an association of manufacturers or suppliers that maintain prices at a high level and restrict competition. To find the origin of escalation, we must look at the crackdown of Colombia's cocaine transport made by law enforcement. This escalation caused the drug suppliers to seek easier, alternate routes for transportation. Enter the Mexican cartels with established routes. This slide illustrates the various drugs. We see cocaine traffic from Colombia, ephedra traffic from China, marijuana traffic which originates in Mexico, and so on. This gives you a picture of the drug routes as of 2008. It also gives an idea of the main entry points into the United States. Here we see the main territorial areas of each major cartel. It's important to take note of the white areas on the map, as it is in these disputed areas and territories that much of the violence occurs. The source of conflict has become not only the drug routes, but the territory itself. There are 9 major cartels, and of those 2, the predominant and most violent are the Los Zetas and the Sinaloa cartels. The Sinaloa cartel is led by a Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, Mexico's most wanted drug trafficker, and his estimated net worth is about $1 billion US. The Sinaloa cartel fought the Juarez cartel in a long and bloody battle for control over drug trafficking routes in and around a northern city. This single battle, resulted in defeat for the Juarez cartel, but not before taking the lives of somewhere between 5,000 and 12,000 people. As of May 2010, numerous reports by both Mexican and U.S. media claim that this cartel has infiltrated the Mexican federal government and military and colluded with it to destroy the other cartels. The Los Zetas gained power by their leader hiring corrupt former elite military soldiers and forming essentially a private army. This cartel is notorious for targeting civilians and is responsible for such acts as a 2010 and 2011 San Fernando massacre. 2010 involved 72 civilians murdered, and 2011 the discovery of mass graves of 193 corpses that were the direct result of the Los Zetas being suspicious that these people were being recruited by a rival cartel to be gang members. Those bodies that have been identified were mostly civilians trying to move to a better life. The Zetas involved themselves in more than drug trafficking, and they have also been connected to human trafficking, pipeline trafficked oil theft, extortion, and trading pirated CDs. Their criminal network is said to reach far from Mexico, including into Central America, the United States, and Europe. Los Zetas uses the internet and media to spread most of their propaganda and to glorify their lifestyle. They post numerous YouTube videos of assassinations, torture scenes, and interrogations, and although these posts are quickly taken down, most of them are likely to be seen and reposted somewhere else. One method that's used to recruit smugglers: the cartels post help wanted posters throughout the city and run ads in the classified section of newspapers, asking for help with a small errand of driving a car to California to serve an important business organization. The drivers are usually unaware that they're smuggling drugs hidden in the car. Even if the job seems suspicious, the ad respondents follow simple instructions for a quick payment of about $500. Cartels also recruit what's called straw buyers. Straw buyers are individuals that don't have prior criminal records and can buy weapons from licensed dealers. Some buyers are housewives, mothers, cousins, kids, elderly, and any families that are less suspicious. They're typically paid $100 a weapon or more. Brookings narcotics experts estimate that as much as 40 to 50% of the Mexican population works in the informal, if not illegal, economy. Officials estimate that the drug trade makes up 3 to 4% of Mexico's $1.5 trillion annual gross domestic product and employ at least 500,000 people. Another matter are threats. These cartels don't just make threats of violence, they carry them out. They use such things as psychological warfare, because either through coercion or scare tactics, they influence their targets' perceptions, attitudes, and behaviors. The violence includes everything from beheadings, kidnappings, assassinations, bombings, and grenades. Many of the dead found show signs of torture, such as their hands tied behind their back and being set on fire. Bodies are often found dumped along the road or in mass graves. Cartels also use bribes and extortion as a means to keep their business running. Give them money and protection or face death. Kidnappings have become an extortion scheme, and cartels can charge such thing as a war tax within their territory, and if you can't pay or won't pay the tax, a family member is kidnapped until they have been paid. The cartel's most targeted group, journalists, have been influenced by sheer fear. In 2008, 95 journalists were attacked, 28 killed, 8 missing, and dozens threatened. To look at the guns, research shows that weapons and arms trafficked in Mexico from gun dealers in the United States. February 2008, William Hoover, Assistant Director for Field Operations of ATF, testified before the U.S. Congress that over 90% of the firearms that have either been recovered in or interdicted in transport to Mexico originated from various sources within the United States. Although, as we've seen earlier, violence between drug cartels has been occurring long before the war began, December 2006, newly elected President Philip Calderon sent 6,500 federal troops to a state to end the drug violence. As you can see, this first action escalated up until, as of 2011, Mexico's military had captured 11,544 people who were believed to have been involved with cartels. But really what his war on drugs has done is to dramatically increase the number of murders. Mexican cartels advance their operations in part by corrupting or intimidating law enforcement officials. Oftentimes, the Mexican municipal, state, and federal governments officials, along with the police forces, work with the cartels in an organized network of corruption. Why? The police typically earn less than teachers or burrito vendors, and therefore they are easily bought. While the Calderon administration has attempted to fight not only the drug cartels, but the government's own internal corruption, still, public officials, even though they may be arrested, are rarely, if ever, convicted. To summarize this portion of our presentation, this quote from the Human Rights Watch report of 2011 paints the picture. This dramatic surge in violence has been driven in large part by the struggle between and within powerful cartels to control the drug trade and other lucrative illicit businesses such as human trafficking. These groups have committed serious crimes against one another, as well as against members of the security forces. Their illegal activities have also touched virtually every sphere of public life, from extortions of small businesses to blockades of major highways, from closure of schools to nighttime curfews, from mass kidnappings to assassinations of public officials. They have used public displays of violence, from depositing severed heads in town squares to hanging mutilated bodies from overpasses, to sow terror not only among their rivals, but also within the general population. The impact on Mexican society has been profound.
Hi everyone, my name is Vincent, and I will be talking about the effects of the conflict on the communities in Mexico. So far, there's been an estimated 70,000 people killed in the drug war as a direct result of this drug war. The government estimates that there's going to be about a 20% drop in violence this year, which would result in 2,000 fewer killings. I think this statistic is pretty remarkable for a couple of reasons. One, 20% is a pretty big drop, so that's good news. But also, that corresponds to 2,000 killings, which really just shows the extent of the violence that's happening, year to year, month to month, day to day, even. So as one of the direct results of the violence is that many people have started to abandon their homes out of fear, and there's many pueblos that are basically ghost towns. One of the articles I read talked about how there's this group of about maybe 20 towns or so, all pretty close together, and all of them are abandoned because of the cartels. And what happens is that the cartels will come and they'll extort money from the villagers, asking them for a protective tax for the I guess, the privilege, so to speak, of living in their town without violence, which often drives people out because they can't pay, or even if they do pay, they're still suspect to violence. So what happens is that small groups of armed men will come down to attack the towns, usually in groups of under 100, and they usually have AK-47s, so they're heavily armed, and those who resist are often killed. The article interviewed a man who had a nephew who lived in a town that was raided, and his nephew stood his ground, said he was not gonna, give in to the cartels, and then when they came back, and the next day or week or however long it was, they came for him and he ran, and they killed him, right there in the fields of his farm. This has resulted in about 1.6 million Mexicans who have been displaced from 2006 to 2011, which averages out to over 300,000 a year, which is just an amazing number of people who have to, leave their residence out of fear. I don't know if you can really see the map on the right, but it shows the extent of different cartels' influences. But you can just sort of see in general just these really large swaths of land that are under control of somebody, and so you can see how difficult it is for many people to leave. Sometimes you have people who are fleeing terrible situations just so that they can end up in ones that are just bad and not terrible. And especially with as much land is under different control, some people don't really have the means to find somewhere safe. So this in part, and along with other factors, have resulted in a lot of missing people. There's been an estimated 26,000 people reported missing in Mexico. Many of them are seized by drug traffickers or state security forces. Some of those who are kidnapped by the cartels are often forced to work in marijuana fields, or work in their meth labs, or be soldiers, or be couriers, or somehow work for the cartels, and if they don't, then they're killed. So this is one way that the cartels keep their numbers big, which is just by destroying these communities. The one, perhaps, I guess, the silver lining you can call it, is that some of those people who are reported missing are only reported missing because they fled their town with little warning, and so they're not, enslaved, and they're not necessarily in danger, but they are in hiding, having to rebuild their lives, and hoping that this doesn't happen again. But as we saw with how much land is controlled, I wouldn't be surprised if people are forced to flee all the time. The government has received harsh criticism from international communities for not assisting families in finding loved ones. There's a lot of bureaucracy involved. There's a lot of people who have to go state to state, or from one jail to another, or from one morgue to another, or hospital, just to find their loved ones. There's not really an easy system in place to find these people. So the government has started to make an attempt to make it easier to search for people by reducing the amount of bureaucracy involved. So at least there's some small progress happening somewhere. However, there's overall little faith in the government, especially with as much corruption as there is in the police forces. Corruption is rampant, really. The Attorney General's office in Mexico stated as of 2005 that about 1/5 of their officers were under investigation for criminal activities, many of them involved with the cartel. General Aponte made a lot of accusations that police officers were active in kidnapping, drug smuggling, and operating their own protection rackets, like I talked before. So they're also probably contributing to the displacement of these communities. He also accused an anti-kidnapping squad of actually working with organized crime to facilitate kidnappings and find ways to not get caught. He made accusations that many police act as bodyguards to the cartels because they're already trained and they have access to weapons. And also some of them he accused helped coordinate landing of airplane drug shipments outside of Mexico. The article didn't really mention more about this, but I was sort of speculating that maybe because they're police officers and our government sort of has a lot of respect for police officers, maybe it's easier for them to get across the border and coordinate these landings. But I'm not quite sure. This is just me theorizing, I guess. The government has tried to reduce corruption, but it remains a serious problem, especially with how widespread the corruption is. Police corruption, along with rampant cartel violence, has really withered away hope in many citizens who live in areas that are heavily controlled by the cartels. As a result of this, people have been starting to take justice into their own hands. An article I read mentioned that in the state of Guerrero, vigilante groups have been arising in places rife with crime, particularly rural areas. And as you can imagine, in those areas, there's probably fewer police, and that means probably a greater percentage of them are corrupt or working with the cartels, especially since they probably make less money working in rural areas, so you probably have a pretty good percentage of police in those areas who are corrupt. So it's not safe for citizens, really. So the vigilantes, they arm themselves and they patrol the streets. Their goal is to prevent crime and bring justice to perpetrators without police involvement, because the police may be working with the perpetrators. This is interesting. So vigilante groups have joined protesters from a teachers union that have recently become violent. So the teachers in this union have been protesting, and the protests have recently been getting violent and more out of control. These vigilante groups have started to support them, protesting with them, helping them, so forth. It's kind of amazing that these two groups who seem so different. On one hand, teachers protesting, and on the other hand, armed men with masks roaming the streets. But really, them working together really shows just how angry and powerless the people feel, that they have to start taking matters into their own hands, really. So just some conclusions. Overall, the drug war has affected the people of Mexico greatly. Killings and violence are rampant. Extortion and unchecked crime has displaced over 1 million people, thousands of people a year. Police corruption has become common, and so people have to be wary of not only the cartels, who are very ruthless in their tactics, but also the police, because making some sort of report to the police may end up having the cartel come directly after you. As a result of this, corruption and lack of government response, protests and vigilante justice are becoming commonplace in response to the violence. So this war has definitely had huge effects on Mexican communities. Thank you.
Today, the Mexican drug war has left thousands of people dead and missing, changing forever the everyday life not only of the people of Mexico, but also for the neighboring countries. I'm going to talk about some of the ways that this conflict affects individuals on their daily lives, customs, and culture. I'll start with the journalists reporting on the conflict. Because of the conflict, journalists feel that they no longer have freedom of press, as they and their families have become targets of violence because of the reports about the war with the cartels. To date, Mexico is one of the countries with the higher murder rates of journalists. People in Mexico live constantly afraid for themselves and their families because of narco-traffic-related murders and kidnappings. Here we see how children had to adapt to the conflict. And this is a program called Stop Drop and Sing, and it's a simulation implemented for schools, elementary school. This is a new campaign intended to protect children from gunfire.
La ola de violencia que azota Acapulco ha llevado a maestros a poner en marcha programas para enseñar a los niños de la escuela primaria cómo protegerse en caso de un tiroteo. El entrenamiento es impartido por funcionarios de la Secretaría de Seguridad Pública y Protección Civil de Acapulco.
La situación que se vive actualmente en la ciudad y en general en todo el país.
Now, we'll see the story of a young perpetrator of violence. He is a 14-year-old. He was an assassin for the Cartel del Sur. He was born in San Diego, California, and he was apprehended in Mexico, where he admitted to killing 4 people from age 11. And he says on this video that he did this by cutting their throats. He also began using drugs from age 12. So he is the face of those individuals who joined the conflict because of lack of resources and education, which affect a large part of the population of Mexico.
Vamos ahora a esta historia que ha llamado muchísimo la atención en internet y en las redes sociales. En Morelos, este jueves fue detenido Edgar Jimenez Lugo. ¿Tú empezaste a ejecutar? ¿Tú eres el que sales en el video golpeando a un sujeto que está colgado en una casa? Sí. ¿Quién te daba órdenes de golpearlos, de ejecutar?
Negro.
¿Dónde aprendiste a ejecutar, a golpear? ¿Te drogabas?
Me drogaba el negro.
¿Te drogaba el negro? ¿Desde cuándo te drogaba el negro?
Desde los 12.
¿Cuántos ejecutaste, dices?
4.
¿Cómo los ejecutaste? ¿Cómo los ejecutaste?
Los degollé.
El Ponchis asegura que Jesús Radilla, alias el Negro, jefe de sicarios del Cártel del Pacífico Sur, fue quien lo reclutó, amenazándolo de muerte si no se incorporaba a su grupo.
¿Cómo te uniste a la banda?
Me levantaron.
¿A ti te levantaron? ¿Quién te levantó?
Negro.
¿Y te convenció o te obligó a estar en eso?
Me obligó.
¿Qué te dijo?
Trabajaba en un montaje.
Junto con el Ponchis, fueron capaces.
So at the end, this young man explains that he joined the conflict because he was forced to do it, and he was afraid that he was going to be killed if he didn't join the conflict, the war. Violence, unfortunately, has become part of Mexican mainstream culture. One of the unintended effects of this war is that the culture has absorbed the specifics of the conflict through music, literature, and visually through soap operas, which are called telenovelas, and they are a very important part of Hispanic culture. Here we're going to see an example of the music. It's called narcocorridos, and they are the stories through music of drug lords and how they have rise to power. So here will be
Traía mucha gente, su negocio se lo requería, poderoso y también muy alegre, como el diablo se le conocía. ráfaga llevaba un hombre, no fallaba, era muy efectivo. Lo apreciaban mucho sus patrones, y se diga su gente y amigos. El dinero, el poder y la fama son tres cosas muy afrodisíacas. Sin buscar las mujeres te sobran, solteritas, viudas y casadas.
So this was a story of a drug lord who rise to power and became famous and had a lot of money. And so it's visually and through the lyrics you can hear how this happened, how this became to be. So here we see a young musician. His name was Valentin Elizalde. He was killed a few years back after performing a narco corrido about one drug lord on another drug lord's territory. So he is a victim of this type of music and the glorification or the part of the controversy about this type of music. Now these slides are showing some of the examples of literature that has become very, very popular, not just in Mexico, but throughout Latin America. And those are the accounts of the stories of victims and literary accounts of the drug lords, the narco traffic, and so this slide talks about the movies and the telenovelas, which are very popular among Hispanics. They are vital part of the culture, and they're part of the daily lives of people in Mexico and the rest of Latin America. So for this same reason, they are controversial because just like the music, they show to the citizens visually they show the violent acts that have that sometimes are accounted in somewhat heroically, involving the same criminals that are causing the problem for narco traffic. So this last slide, I will just finish saying that there are psychosocial consequences for both victims and perpetrators of the conflict. And these are some of the psychosocial effects that affect the Mexican population. And one of the things that I will emphasize is that the severity of these consequences are increased on intensity by the age of those involved. So the younger the victims of this conflict are, the more difficult will be to help them recover and have a meaningful life.
Hi, this is Brittany, and I'm presenting on the action plan. The history of Mexico's war on drugs is imperative when reviewing current policies. Mexico's former president, Felipe Calderón, worked with the United States to launch a crackdown against drug trafficking organizations. Calderón attempted to strategize ways to combat the drug trafficking organizations by dismantling drug organizations through targeting cartel leaders. The U.S. supported Calderón's efforts to fund and labor Mexico's drug war, in which the U.S. focused on cross-border policing and targeting drug users. Calderón invested billions of dollars to train and equip the police force. He assigned over 50,000 soldiers to the streets of Mexico, and he attempted to strengthen the judicial system. However, Calderon's efforts did not seem to be effective as he became the president of Mexico during the rise of the drug cartel. The cartel was moving more aggressively and swiftly than before. The police staff in Mexico was easily corrupted and targeted by the cartel to look the other way or become active members of the cartel due to their low salaries. Mexico's judicial system was easily corrupted, and many times it was discovered that judiciaries were working with the cartel. Ironically, they were rarely prosecuted. Calderon's efforts during his presidency led to 40,000 deaths during the drug war. Subsequently, with bilateral cooperation with the U.S., during Calderon's presidency, Mexico's government was able to kill or capture 25 of the top 37 cartel kingpins. We are now moving on to the current policy on Mexico's drug war. The current president of Mexico, Enrique Peña Nieto, has announced his intentions to shift the focus of Mexico's drug war from the cartel leaders to the civilians dealing and in possession of drugs, as well as promoting a focus on the bilateral economic ties with the U.S. Due to the controversy about the poor effects of the U.S. involvement in Mexico's drug war, President Obama has announced that the United States has a new agenda. Please click the link below. Now we will discuss policy considerations. First is the argument for decriminalization. Many people argue for decriminalization, which means not to arrest people for possessing drugs. In 2012, Washington and Colorado legalized marijuana use, which posed more of a concern in regard to public health. The Global Commission on Drug Policy advocates for drug treatment for users rather than incarceration. Second, targeting all players in the drug war. Typically, it has been seen that efforts have been combated to target the cartel leaders. However, it has been advocated recently to target the operation of the cartels, the middleman. Targeting the operational component will lessen violence and break down the distribution of drugs. Next, additional border security. Border Patrol reduces the likelihood of drugs and violence crossing over to the U.S. This lessens drug availability in the U.S., considering that Mexico is one of the world's largest drug suppliers. As we've seen in the video, the U.S. and Mexico are both affected by Mexico's war on drugs, and they must work together to combat this issue. Where can victims seek services? The Mexican consulate is available to provide services to victims of the Mexican drug war. As you see, there is a list of contact numbers if you or someone you know is a victim of the Mexican drug war. Specifically, they assist in providing legal services to victims, protection programs, and humanitarian visas to individuals and their families threatened by drug lords or the drug cartel. How to become involved? What we can do to assist Mexico in the nation's drug problem is to educate people on what is occurring. Educate people on the number of deaths per year against innocent families and those in power. We can discuss the corruption in the Mexican government and the corruption with their police officers. Finally, discussing the effects that the drug war has on Mexico's children. Lobbying for censorship. We can also lobby for censorship in Mexico. Much of Mexico's entertainment, which is narco corrido, which is a culture depiction on the drug war in Mexico, is seen in soap operas, books, and music. This becomes embedded in their culture and it becomes the norm.